My first record deal was with Jam Master Jay's JMJ Records, which I signed when I was around 21 years old. Jay is the guy who taught me how to actually put together a song. Before I met him, I was just spitting over beats without any direction. Jay groomed me. He slowed me down and showed me how to incorporate melody and structure into a fully fleshed out hit song. Those were critical skills for me to develop, but at the end of the day, JMJ wasn't a real label. It was more of a production company. Jay had a studio where he recorded artists, and sadly where he would later be murdered. Once he thought an artist was polished enough, he would bring their music to an actual label like Atlantic or Def Jam to pitch to their A&R department. If the label was into the music, Jay would sign a deal for JMJ. Then in theory, the artist would get paid out of Jay's deal. I wasn't aware at first that that's how it worked. I thought once I'd signed to JMJ, I officially made it. I won't ever claim to be the smartest guy in the room, but I do catch on to things pretty quickly. Once I realized JMJ wasn't going to put my records out directly, I said, nah, this ain't it, and asked for an exit. Jay didn't want to let me go scot-free, and in the end, I had to pay him $50,000 to get out of my contract. After that, I hooked up with a production duo, the Trackmasters, and through them was able to do a real deal with Columbia Records. I recorded a bunch of songs for my debut album, but then things stalled. More on that shortly. Before the album could come out, I got shot. As the rumors began to spread about what was behind the shooting, Columbia panicked and dropped me. At that point, I was almost 25 years old, very young for a teacher, a doctor, or a lawyer, but not so young in the youth-oriented culture like hip-hop. Worse, I was perceived as damaged goods. On top of being shot, I'd already forced my way out of one deal and been dropped by a major label. Most people in the industry didn't think I was worth the headache. A lot of rappers in my situation would have felt very uneasy. They would have worried that their dream was about to slip out of their reach. Racked by anxiety and confusion, if a label, any label, offered them a deal, they probably would have signed it that day. And yet, that wasn't my mentality. I didn't care about what had already happened to me. I wasn't signing anything unless I was sure it was the best deal for me, in that moment and going forward. My past wasn't going to cloud my vision for the future. The first deal I got offered was from Universal. They said they wanted me, but when I had a lawyer review their contract, I learned the actual deal they were offering was a joint venture with $1.3 million for a solo album and a G-Unit project. I saw it for what it was, a way for them to work with me while hedging their bets. I wasn't looking to partner with anyone who wasn't prepared to go all the way in with me. I passed on Universal. Then a guy named 3H from Capitol Records reached out. He flew me out to L.A. my first trip to the West Coast. When I got there, I was surprised to see he was this little white kid. It seemed crazy to me that he already had so much juice. But I thought it was ill he had already maneuvered himself into this position of power. He was hungry and cocky, not unlike myself. I was very tempted to work with him. Then his boss at Capitol got cold feet. He told Triple H I was too scary and that he didn't want bodyguards at his house. He wasn't incorrect. There was a menacing aura around me at the time, and bodyguards followed along everywhere I went. I wasn't going to try to convince someone who couldn't see my value. As much as I liked Triple H, I knew that Capitol wasn't the right situation either. At the time, I was represented by Violator. Chris was my manager and someone I leaned on for advice. He supported me when I didn't take those deals, but I could tell it wasn't easy for him. Chris had to worry if I was ever going to give him a return on his investment in me. Yes, I had the streets buzzing through my mixtapes, but I had a lot of baggage too. The safe move would have been to take one of those deals and finally get my debut album out. Things got even more complicated when Todd Moskovich, who was working with Chris at Violator, lined up a deal for me at J Records. Todd said it was the perfect situation. I'd be working with the industry legend Clive Davis, which would calm a lot of folks' fears about me. Todd pushed hard for me to sign with J Records. At almost the same time Todd was making his push, I got word that Eminem was interested in signing me to Shady Records, his imprint on Interscope. I knew right away that that was the right situation. The Marshall Mathers LP had just sold $22 million. M was the reason so many white fans were embracing hip-hop culture. It was the type of association you might get access to only once in a lifetime, if you're fortunate. I was faced with a difficult decision. Today, people believed I would have succeeded no matter what label I signed with. Go in the chat rooms and message boards, and you'll even see fans claiming things like 50 was so hot back then. He could have signed with Koch and still soloed on records. Yeah, I was hot. But even if my ego would like to believe otherwise, my career wouldn't have had anywhere near the same trajectory had I signed anywhere other than Interscope. Not Koch, not Universal, not J Records. It wasn't just Eminem's presence either. Interscope gave me access to Dr. Dre, one of the greatest producers of all time. There was no other team out there that could match the power of that tag team. I knew I had been groomed for the moment by all my other failures and misses. When that door opened, even just a crack, no one had to tell me twice to walk through it. Before I could take the step, though, Todd Moskowitz had to get out of the way. The J Records deal would mean money for Violator. The Eminem deal wouldn't. Todd refused to let it go. So some of my crew and I had to go to Violator to discuss the situation. Todd came on very aggressively, explaining that we were contractually obligated to sign his deal. I looked at Chris for help, but he shrugged his shoulders like there was nothing he could do. He was caught between what was best for his artist and what Todd thought was best for his company. It was a surreal situation, listening to this guy in a sports jacket and dress shoes trying to convince me I should pass up on the opportunity of a lifetime to sign what I knew was a lesser deal. What Todd was saying didn't sit right with me or my people. We expressed our concerns. We might have been a little aggressive in articulating them. At one point, I remember Todd running out of his office and down the stairs towards the street, his dress shoes clicking and clacking on the steps the whole way down. Suffice it to say, that was the last of any talk about me signing to J Records. Interscope would be my new home. We all know how the deal turned out. It made me one of the biggest stars in the history of hip-hop. But I have to stress this again. At the time, it was not a clear-cut decision. It was harder to tell Violator no. I didn't give a rat's ass what Todd Moskowitz wanted, but Chris was a good friend. Passing on J Records put him in a tough spot. He stuck with me when a lot of other folks had abandoned me. He kept it real when others had blown smoke up my ass. It would have been a lot easier to just sign the J Records deal, get a good check, and make everyone happy. It would have been a compromise, but one a lot of people could have lived with. Not me. You cannot, under any circumstances, compromise when it's your vision on the line. You have to be prepared to go against popular opinion and turn down money, even if it jeopardizes your relationships, until you're confident you found the right opportunity. Would you marry a man just because he proposed? Or a woman because your friends think she's great? I hope not. You don't make a commitment like that just because someone else wants you to. I don't care if you're single, 37 years old, and every time you talk to your mom, the first thing out of her mouth is, "When you giving me a grandchild?" You wait until you're 100% sure he's Mr. Right before you even think about saying yes. Would you put an offer on a house because the agent you're working with is getting tired of showing you around and just wants his commission? Hell no. You get another agent and go from open house to open house until you finally find a home you can afford that you're excited to spend the rest of your life in. When you settle, you're demonstrating a lack of confidence. If your journey hasn't been easy, you might start to question the value of what you're doing. Maybe you better grab the next thing to get offered before you never get offered anything again. When you begin thinking like that, you've lost the hustler spirit. I was recently talking to a friend who was struggling to find that confidence. He started a business from the ground up and poured his heart and soul into it. After years of hard work, he found success and bigger companies started making offers. He looked at where his industry was heading and decided it was the right time to sell. He entered negotiations with one company and spent months and months going over terms of the deal. He spent tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers. Then, just before he was about to sign on the dotted line, the other company pulled out. The deal was dead. My friend was stunned. It seriously messed him up. He had already started thinking about that dream house we would buy with the proceeds, vacations he'd take his kids on. He'd seen all those zeros in his bank account, and now they were gone. He was depressed. He felt like he had spent so much time and money for nothing. The idea of starting new negotiations gave him anxiety. He told his lawyers to find the quickest deal they could. He wasn't worried about fit. He wasn't worried about long-term potential. He just wanted to get something done. He'd lost confidence in his value. It was time for a pep talk. He needed to reconnect with the hustler spirit that led him to start the business in the first place. Remember, if just one person was interested, that means your idea has value, I reassured him. Don't panic. Don't settle for something else unless it's right. There are companies out there who prey on people in your exact situation. Don't walk into their trap. Get back to work and wait for the right partner to emerge. I could address his uncertainties directly because I could relate to what he was feeling. When you pour everything you have into something and it doesn't work out, insecurity sets in. That's when you're vulnerable. The predators will sense that self-doubt and try to take advantage of it. I felt the same kind of vulnerability after I got dropped from Columbia. The self-doubt started to sabotage my energy. My fans probably didn't sense it, but it was there. Thankfully, my hustler spirit was stronger than any pessimism that might have infiltrated my spirit. I had the confidence and patience to wait until the right deal was in front of me. I believed in my value, and eventually I was rewarded for it. In just a couple of years, I went from being dropped to releasing one of the best-selling hip-hop albums of all time. Now, the guys that I used to sit next to that I hustled with, they would say I was lucky the Interscope came after me. But as my grandmother would say, you are truly blessed.